Hello, English learners. I am Emma, your host, and your English teacher for today's masterclass. If you are new here, I would love to tell you that we upload a new English learning video every single day on this channel, designed to help you improve your English faster, smarter, and more confidently. In today's episode, you're not just going to practice English listening, you're going to expand the way you think, express, and communicate in English, because today's lesson is a complete deep dive into one of the most powerful areas of fluency, advanced vocabulary. We are stepping into a C2 level advanced English vocabulary masterclass, where you'll learn how high-level English words are used in real life, how they shape meaning, and how they elevate the way you speak and write. Throughout this session, we'll explore sophisticated vocabulary through daily life situations, real conversations, emotional expression, professional communication, and intellectual discussion. You'll hear advanced words in context, understand their subtle meanings, and practice using them naturally, so they become part of your active vocabulary. Not just words you recognize, but words you confidently use. By the end of this masterclass, you will not only understand advanced English vocabulary more clearly, but you'll also feel more prepared to express complex ideas, describe experiences with precision, and communicate with the confidence expected at the C2 level. I'll also guide you through practical comprehension and usage exercises, so you can immediately apply what you learn. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you never miss our daily English learning lessons, designed to take your fluency to the next level. So, take a deep breath, focus your mind, and if possible, keep a notebook beside you, because today's vocabulary journey is going to transform the way you use English. Let's begin. When we talk about reaching the C2 level in English, we are not simply talking about knowing more words. We are talking about transforming the way you think in English. At this level, vocabulary is no longer just a communication tool. It becomes a precision instrument, allowing you to express emotions more accurately, ideas more intelligently, and experiences more vividly. A C2 speaker does not just say something is very good. They might say it is exceptional, remarkable, outstanding, or even transformative, depending on the emotional weight they want to convey. Imagine two people describing the same experience. One says, "The meeting was good." The other says, "The meeting was remarkably productive and intellectually stimulating." Both sentences are correct, but the second one carries depth, authority, and sophistication. This is the power of advanced vocabulary. It does not just communicate information, it communicates presence, confidence, and credibility. At the C2 level, vocabulary becomes deeply connected with context, tone, and intention. You begin to understand that words are not interchangeable, even when they appear similar. For example, consider the words thin, slender, skinny, and emaciated. All relate to body size, but each carries a completely different emotional and descriptive tone. Slender sounds elegant, skinny can sound critical, and emaciated suggests illness or extreme weakness. Advanced fluency means choosing the word that precisely matches the meaning you want to deliver. Now let's bring this into a real-life, daily context. Imagine you are describing a colleague at work. Instead of saying, she is very smart. You might say, she is exceptionally perceptive and analytically sharp. Notice how the sentence instantly sounds more professional, more respectful, and more expressive. This is exactly how C2 vocabulary enhances your communication in professional environments, interviews, presentations, and leadership conversations. Let's deepen this understanding with another scenario. Think about a challenging day. A basic speaker might say, "I was very tired," but a C2 speaker has access to emotional nuance. They might say, "I felt completely drained, both mentally and physically," or "I was utterly exhausted after such a demanding day." The message is similar, but the emotional clarity is far stronger. Advanced vocabulary allows your listener to feel what you felt, not just understand it intellectually. At this level, vocabulary also helps you express abstract ideas, concepts that are difficult to explain with simple words. For instance, instead of saying, "I don't like his behavior," you might say, "I find his behavior ethically questionable and professionally inappropriate." Notice how the advanced phrasing introduces judgment, formality, and specificity, which are all markers of high-level fluency. Now let's pause for a practical mental exercise. I want you to listen carefully and visualize the difference in intensity. I will give you a basic sentence, then expand it to a C2 version. Picture this sentence in your mind. "The movie was scary. Now elevate it." "The film was profoundly unsettling and psychologically disturbing." Feel the difference. The second sentence creates atmosphere, emotional texture, and intellectual evaluation. That is the leap from intermediate vocabulary to advanced expressive fluency. Let's continue building this awareness through daily life language. Imagine you are talking about the weather. A simple description might be, "It was very hot." But at the C2 level, you gain expressive flexibility. You might say, "The heat was absolutely oppressive," or "The temperature was unbearably sweltering." These words are not just descriptive, they are experiential. They allow the listener to sense discomfort, intensity, and physical impact. Now think about positive emotional experiences. Instead of saying, "I was very happy," you could say, "I was genuinely elated," or "I felt an overwhelming sense of joy." Notice how advanced vocabulary helps you scale emotions, from mild happiness to deep fulfillment to euphoric excitement. This emotional scaling is a defining trait of C2 expression. Let's move into social communication. Imagine you attended a gathering. Instead of saying, "The people were nice," you might say, "The people were incredibly hospitable and warm," or "They were gracious hosts who made everyone feel welcome." These expressions reflect cultural awareness, politeness, and descriptive sophistication, all of which strengthen interpersonal communication. Now let's do a guided practice together. I will describe a situation using advanced vocabulary, and I want you to mentally infer the meaning through context. After weeks of relentless workload, she finally took a brief but rejuvenating break that restored her mental clarity. Even if the word rejuvenating is new to you, the surrounding words help you decode its meaning: refreshing, energizing, healing. This is another key C2 skill: understanding unfamiliar vocabulary through contextual inference. Let's try another. The city's rapid expansion led to chaotic infrastructure and overwhelming congestion. Here, Words like expansion, infrastructure, and congestion frequently appear in news, urban discussions, and academic contexts. Exposure to such vocabulary allows you to participate in higher-level conversations about society, development, and policy. Now let's bring the focus back to your personal expression. Think about a goal you are working toward. Instead of saying, "I really want to improve my English," you might say, "I am deeply committed to refining my English fluency," or "I am determined to achieve linguistic excellence." Notice the motivational intensity these words carry. They reflect seriousness, dedication, and long-term vision. Here is another reflective practice. Listen to this basic sentence. Learning English is hard. Now transform it. Mastering English is intellectually demanding, but immensely rewarding. Feel the contrast. The advanced sentence does not just describe difficulty, it balances challenge with value. This dual framing is common in C2 discourse, especially in academic and motivational communication. Let's step into professional vocabulary for a moment. Imagine giving feedback at work. Instead of saying, "Your idea is good," you might say, "Your proposal is highly innovative and strategically sound." Such phrasing demonstrates leadership communication. It shows evaluation, respect, and analytical thinking. Now consider constructive criticism. Instead of saying, "This plan has problems," you could say, "This plan has several logistical shortcomings that need to be addressed." Notice how advanced vocabulary allows criticism to sound professional rather than personal. This is essential in workplace diplomacy. Let's now engage in a deeper emotional expression exercise. Imagine describing a life-changing experience. A simple version might be, "It changed my life." But at the C2 level, you should say, "It profoundly reshaped my perspective on life," or "It was a transformative experience that altered my priorities." These phrases communicate psychological impact, not just surface change. Advanced vocabulary also strengthens storytelling. Imagine narrating a childhood memory. Instead of saying, "I remember my grandmother's house," you might say, "I have vivid memories of my grandmother's warm and comforting home." Words like vivid and comforting create sensory imagery, allowing listeners to visualize and emotionally connect. Now let's do another contextual comprehension practice. Listen carefully. The professor's lecture was so captivating that the entire audience remained utterly engrossed. Even if engrossed is unfamiliar, the context reveals meaning, fully absorbed, deeply focused, unable to look away. Context is your greatest ally when acquiring C2 vocabulary. Let's reinforce this with repetition, because repetition builds retention. Captivating, engrossing, absorbing, compelling. These words orbit the same semantic field, but each has slightly different usage tones. Learning these clusters is essential for lexical mastery. Now imagine you are describing a challenging decision. Instead of saying, "It was a hard choice," you might say, "It was an emotionally taxing decision," or "I faced a moral dilemma." Such vocabulary introduces philosophical and ethical depth into everyday speech. At the C2 level, you begin to express not only what happened, but how it affected you internally, cognitively, emotionally, and ethically. This multidimensional expression is what distinguishes advanced speakers from intermediate ones. Let's do a final practice reflection in this segment. Think about your English learning journey. Try to upgrade this sentence mentally. I am improving slowly. Now elevate it. I am making gradual but meaningful progress. Or, my improvement has been steady and encouraging. These refined expressions reshape how you perceive your own growth. And that is the deeper psychological impact of advanced vocabulary. It does not only improve communication, it transforms self-perception, confidence, and identity as a language user. Take a moment, breathe, and let these words settle into your mind. Because vocabulary expansion is not about memorizing lists, it is about building a living linguistic system inside you, one that activates naturally when you speak, write, and think. As your vocabulary begins to expand, something subtle but powerful starts to happen inside your mind. You no longer translate your thoughts word by word. Instead, ideas begin forming directly in English, shaped by tone, intention, and emotional precision. This shift is one of the clearest indicators that you are moving closer to C2 fluency, because language is no longer something you assemble. It becomes something you access. At this level, descriptive precision becomes extremely important, not because complexity sounds impressive, but because precision eliminates misunderstanding. Imagine describing a place you recently visited. A basic description might sound like this: the restaurant was nice, but this gives your listener almost no imagery, no emotional tone, no sensory information. Now, listen to the C2 expansion. The restaurant had an inviting ambiance, with soft lighting, and an atmosphere that felt both intimate and elegant. Notice how the vocabulary paints a scene. Words like ambience, intimate, and elegant activate visual and emotional imagination. This is the descriptive layering that advanced speakers naturally use. Let's deepen this descriptive awareness further. Think about sound. Instead of saying, the room was quiet, you could say, the room was enveloped in a profound silence. The verb enveloped transforms silence into something physical, something that surrounds you. This is the poetic dimension of advanced vocabulary, where language creates sensory immersion. Now, imagine describing a city. A simple speaker might say, the city was crowded, but a C2 speaker might express it as, the city was teeming with life, or the streets were bustling with relentless activity. Words like teeming and bustling carry movement, density, and energy. They make the description dynamic rather than static. Let's pause for a guided descriptive practice. Picture yourself standing on a beach at sunset. I will first describe it simply, then elevate it. The sunset was beautiful. Now, listen carefully. The sunset was breathtaking, casting golden hues across the horizon as the waves shimmered under fading light. Feel the difference in emotional resonance. The second sentence does not just state beauty, it illustrates it. This is the expressive expansion you are training your mind to achieve. Advanced vocabulary also strengthens your ability to describe people with nuance and respect. For example, instead of saying, he is very confident, you might say, he carries himself with remarkable self-assurance, or he has a commanding presence. Notice how these phrases shift from personality description to aura description. This is common in professional and leadership discourse. Now, let's explore emotional gradation. The ability to scale feelings accurately, because at the C2 level, emotions are rarely expressed in extremes like very happy or very sad. Instead, they are placed on a spectrum. Consider happiness. You might feel content, pleased, delighted, thrilled, or euphoric. Each word represents a different emotional intensity. Learning to position emotions correctly allows you to communicate internal states with psychological clarity. Let's practice this with context. Imagine you received good news about your career. Instead of saying, I was very happy, you could say, I was absolutely thrilled by the news, or I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Notice how thrilled conveys excitement, while fulfillment conveys meaning and satisfaction. Advanced vocabulary allows you to select emotional accuracy, not just emotional volume. Now, let's explore negative emotional nuance. Instead of saying, I was very nervous, you might say, I felt deeply apprehensive, or I was overwhelmed with anxiety. Words like apprehensive often appear in academic writing, professional communication, and psychological discussion, making them essential for C2 mastery. Let's embed this into a daily life scenario. Imagine you are waiting for an important interview result. You might say, the anticipation was almost unbearable. The word anticipation communicates waiting with emotional tension, far more expressive than simply saying waiting. Now, let's move into intellectual vocabulary, language used to express thoughts, opinions, and analysis. Instead of saying, I think this idea is interesting, you might say, I find this idea intellectually stimulating, or this concept is thought-provoking. Words like stimulating and thought-provoking signal analytical engagement. They are frequently used in academic, corporate, and leadership environments. Let's expand this through reflective practice. Think about a book you read. A basic reflection might be, the book was good, but at the C2 level, the book offered profound insights into human behavior, or it presented a compelling exploration of identity and purpose. Notice how advanced vocabulary transforms casual opinion into intellectual commentary. Now, let's practice contextual inference again. Listen carefully. Her argument was so coherent and persuasive that it shifted the entire discussion. Even if coherent is unfamiliar, context reveals its meaning. Clear, logical, well-structured. This skill allows you to absorb advanced vocabulary even when you encounter it for the first time. Let's reinforce retention through repetition clusters. Coherent, logical, structured, persuasive, articulate. These words frequently appear together in discussions, debates, and presentations. Learning vocabulary in semantic families accelerates fluency because your brain links meaning networks rather than isolated terms. Now, let's step into professional workplace communication. Imagine discussing team performance. Instead of saying, the team did well, you might say, the team demonstrated exceptional collaboration and efficiency. Words like collaboration and efficiency are core to corporate discourse. They signal leadership awareness and organizational thinking. Now, imagine addressing a challenge. Instead of saying, we had problems, you could say, we encountered several operational obstacles, or we faced logistical constraints. Notice how advanced vocabulary reframes difficulty in a solution-oriented tone. let's move into decision-making language. Instead of saying, "We decided quickly," you might say, "We reached a swift and strategic decision." Words like strategic elevate the perceived intelligence behind actions. This is particularly important in executive communication. Now, let's do a guided expressive upgrade exercise. I will give you a simple sentence. Pause mentally and try to elevate it before I do. The project was difficult. Now, elevate. The project was exceptionally demanding and required sustained effort. Feel how the upgraded sentence communicates endurance, complexity, and professional tone. Let's try another. The situation was confusing. Upgrade. The situation was highly ambiguous. Or, it lacked clarity and direction. Words like ambiguous are hallmarks of advanced analytical vocabulary. Now, let's explore sensory description because C2 speakers describe experiences multisensorially. Instead of saying, "The coffee smelled good," you might say, "The coffee had a rich and inviting aroma." Words like aroma introduce sensory sophistication, often used in culinary, hospitality, and lifestyle communication. Imagine tasting food. Instead of saying, "The food was tasty," you could say, "The flavors were exquisitely balanced," or "The dish was remarkably flavorful." This level of vocabulary is essential in social dining conversations and cultural storytelling. Let's pause for a short immersive visualization practice. Picture yourself entering a quiet library. Listen to the advanced description. The library exuded an atmosphere of intellectual serenity, where the faint rustle of pages was the only sound that broke the silence. Notice how vocabulary like exuded and serenity transforms the environment into an emotional space, not just a physical one. Now, let's move into personality description. Instead of saying, "She is kind," you might say, "She is deeply compassionate," or "She possesses genuine empathy." These words reflect emotional intelligence, often used in psychological and interpersonal discussions. Imagine describing determination. Instead of saying, "He never gives up," you might say, "He is remarkably resilient," or "He demonstrates unwavering perseverance." Such vocabulary signals motivational and leadership discourse. Let's practice reflective upgrading again. Basic sentence. I respect him. Upgrade. I hold him in the highest regard. Notice the shift from casual respect to formal admiration. This is register control, another essential C2 skill. At the C2 level, you are constantly adjusting your vocabulary depending on context. Casual conversation, professional dialogue, academic writing, emotional storytelling. Each domain requires lexical flexibility. Let's embed this into a real-life speaking practice. Imagine you are describing your personal growth. Instead of saying, "I changed a lot," you might say, "I have undergone significant personal development," or "I have evolved considerably over the years." Words like undergone and evolved signal introspection and maturity. Now, let's do one final contextual inference exercise in this segment. Listen carefully. Despite numerous setbacks, her resolve remained unshaken. Even if resolve is unfamiliar, context suggests determination, inner strength, commitment. This is how advanced vocabulary becomes learnable even without translation. Take a slow breath here, because what you are building is not just vocabulary, It is expressive capacity, the ability to articulate experience with clarity, depth, and authenticity. As your vocabulary continues to expand, you begin to notice that fluency is no longer only about knowing individual words. It is about knowing how words naturally connect, how they form partnerships, how they create meaning together. This is where collocations enter your journey. And mastering collocations is one of the defining features of true C2 proficiency, because native-level fluency depends not just on vocabulary size, but on vocabulary accuracy. A collocation is simply a natural word partnership, words that frequently appear together because they sound correct to native speakers. For example, we say make a decision, not do a decision. We say heavy rain, not strong rain. At the advanced level, collocations become more sophisticated, more abstract, and more nuanced. Let's explore this through real-life language. Imagine you are talking about success. A basic sentence might be, "She had big success," but a C2 speaker would naturally say, "She achieved remarkable success," or "She attained significant success in her field." Notice how verbs like achieved and attained collocate naturally with success. These pairings sound intellectually refined and contextually accurate. Now let's deepen this through emotional collocations. Instead of saying, "I felt very happiness," you would say, "I felt immense happiness," or "I experienced profound joy." Words like immense and profound frequently collocate with emotional nouns, creating expressive depth. Let's pause for a guided awareness exercise. I will say a noun, and then expand its natural collocations. Listen and absorb the rhythm: responsibility, heavy responsibility, moral responsibility, professional responsibility, influence, considerable influence, growing influence, political influence, impact, lasting impact, profound impact, transformative impact. Learning vocabulary this way trains your brain to retrieve phrases, not isolated words, which significantly increases fluency speed during speaking. Now let's embed this into a daily life speaking scenario. Imagine describing a demanding job. Instead of saying, "My job is very stressful," you might say, "My job carries immense pressure," or "It involves a heavy workload." These collocations sound natural, precise, and contextually fluent. Let's expand into intellectual collocations, frequently used in academic and professional discourse. Instead of saying, "We talked about the problem deeply," you could say, "We conducted an in-depth discussion," or "We engaged in critical analysis." Words like in-depth and critical collocate naturally with intellectual activities. Now let's practice upgrading basic verbs, because verb choice dramatically affects fluency perception. Instead of saying, "The company grew fast," you might say, "The company experienced rapid growth," or "It underwent significant expansion." Notice how nominalization, turning verbs into nouns, often appears in advanced discourse, especially in business and academic communication. Let's explore decision-making collocations. Rather than saying, "We made a plan quickly," you might say, "We formulated a strategic plan," or "We devised an effective strategy." Words like formulated and devised signal intellectual effort and planning sophistication. Now imagine expressing concern. Instead of saying, "I am very worried," you could say, "I have serious concerns," or I feel deep apprehension. Collocations like serious concerns frequently appear in formal discussions, news reports, and executive communication. Let's pause for contextual inference again. Listen carefully. The policy sparked widespread controversy. Even if controversy is unfamiliar, context suggests disagreement, public debate, conflicting opinions. Collocations like sparked controversy are extremely common in media and political discourse. Let's reinforce this through repetition clusters. Sparked controversy, triggered debate, raised concerns, generated discussion. Notice how verbs like sparked, triggered, and generated collocate naturally with social reactions. This is how vocabulary becomes dynamic rather than static. Now, let's move into persuasive language, because C2 speakers are often required to influence, convince, and negotiate. Instead of saying, I want you to agree, you might say, I hope to persuade you, or I aim to present a compelling argument. Words like persuade and compelling are central to persuasive discourse. Imagine presenting an idea at work. Instead of saying, this idea is good, you could say, this proposal offers substantial benefits, or it presents a viable solution. Words like substantial and viable frequently collocate with professional evaluation. Let's step into evaluative language, the vocabulary used to assess quality, performance, and outcomes. Instead of saying, the results were bad, you might say, the results were highly unsatisfactory, or they fell short of expectations. The phrase fell short of expectations is an advanced evaluative collocation widely used in professional feedback. Now consider positive evaluation. Instead of saying, the performance was very good, you might say, the performance was outstanding, or it exceeded expectations. This phrase is extremely common in corporate and academic evaluation. Let's practice reflective upgrading again. Basic sentence. The plan worked well. Upgrade. The plan proved highly effective. Or, it yielded impressive results. Words like yielded introduce formal analytical tone, often used in reports and presentations. Now let's explore conflict and disagreement vocabulary. Instead of saying, we argued a lot, you could say, we had a heated disagreement, or the discussion escalated into conflict. Words like heated and escalated collocate naturally with tension scenarios. Imagine workplace diplomacy. Instead of saying, I disagree, you might say, I respectfully hold a different perspective. This phrasing maintains professionalism while expressing opposition, a critical C2 communication skill. Let's move into problem-solving language. Instead of saying, we fixed the issue, you might say, we resolved the issue, or we implemented a solution. Words like implemented signal structured action and professional execution. Now imagine long-term planning. Instead of saying, we want to grow, you could say, we aim to achieve sustainable growth. The collocation sustainable growth appears frequently in business, economics, and environmental discourse. Let's pause for another immersive visualization practice. Picture yourself attending an international conference. Listen to this advanced description. The conference fostered meaningful dialogue and facilitated knowledge exchange among global experts. Words like fostered and facilitated are hallmarks of academic and diplomatic vocabulary. Now let's explore time-related collocations. Instead of saying, over time, things changed, you might say, over time, significant changes unfolded, or gradual transformation occurred. Words like unfolded and transformation introduce narrative sophistication. Imagine describing improvement. Instead of saying, I improved a lot, you could say, I made substantial progress, or I experienced remarkable improvement. These collocations frequently appear in performance reviews and personal reflections. Let's reinforce retention through repetition clusters again. Substantial progress, steady progress, measurable progress, remarkable progress. Each variation allows expressive flexibility while maintaining collocational accuracy. Now, let's move into emotional resilience vocabulary. Instead of saying, she stayed strong, you might say, she demonstrated emotional resilience, or she remained steadfast. Words like steadfast often appear in motivational and literary discourse. Imagine describing failure constructively. Instead of saying, he failed, you could say, he encountered a setback, or he faced a temporary defeat. Such phrasing reframes failure as part of growth, reflecting mature linguistic framing. Let's do one more contextual inference practice. Listen carefully. His dedication was unwavering despite adversity. Even if adversity is unfamiliar, context suggests hardship, difficulty, opposition. This is the inferential decoding skill that supports C2 listening comprehension. Take a moment here, because what you are building now is phrase instinct, the ability to sense which words belong together, without consciously analyzing grammar. This instinct is what allows advanced speakers to sound natural, persuasive, and intellectually fluent, even in spontaneous conversation. As your vocabulary continues evolving beyond precision and collocation, you begin entering one of the most sophisticated layers of C2 fluency, the realm of metaphorical and abstract expression. This is where language stops functioning purely as a descriptive tool and begins operating as a cognitive and emotional amplifier, allowing you to express ideas that are complex, philosophical, and deeply human. At this level, speakers no longer rely only on literal description. Instead, they frequently use metaphor, symbolism, and figurative language to communicate meaning more powerfully. For example, instead of saying, I am very busy, a C2 speaker might say, I am juggling multiple responsibilities. The verb juggling is metaphorical, borrowed from physical performance, yet instantly understood in professional and daily life contexts. Let's explore another example. Instead of saying, he is very important in the company, you might say, he is a cornerstone of the organization. The word cornerstone originates from architecture, yet metaphorically communicates foundational importance. This cross-domain vocabulary transfer is a defining feature of advanced fluency. Now, imagine describing emotional healing. Instead of saying, time helped me feel better, you could say, time gradually healed my emotional wounds. Notice how the metaphor of wounds transforms emotional pain into something tangible. This is how abstract experiences become communicable through figurative language. Let's pause for a guided metaphor awareness exercise. I will present a literal sentence, then elevate it metaphorically. Literal. She helped me start my career. Metaphorical. She opened the door to my career, or she paved the way for my professional journey. Words like open the door and pave the way are deeply embedded in advanced conversational English. Now let's step into motivational discourse. Instead of saying, don't be afraid, you might say, don't let fear hold you back, or don't allow fear to stand in your way. These metaphors conceptualize fear as a physical barrier, making the message more impactful. Metaphorical vocabulary is especially powerful in storytelling, public speaking, and leadership communication because it creates emotional resonance rather than just logical understanding. Let's explore this through a reflective life scenario. Instead of saying, I faced many challenges, you might say, I navigated through many obstacles, or I walked a difficult path. Words like navigate and path transform life experiences into journeys, one of the most universal metaphors in human language. Now, imagine describing confusion. Instead of saying, I didn't understand the situation, you could say, I was in the dark, or the situation was clouded with uncertainty. These metaphors transform lack of knowledge into visual imagery, darkness, clouds, obscurity. Let's pause for contextual inference again. Listen carefully. After years of struggle, he finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. Even if unfamiliar, the metaphor communicates hope after difficulty. This phrase is widely used in motivational, psychological, and professional narratives. Let's reinforce metaphor clusters. Break the ice. Open doors. Crossroads in life. Turning point. Light at the end of the tunnel. Each phrase communicates complex meaning without literal explanation. Now, let's move into abstract conceptual vocabulary, language used to express ideas that cannot be physically touched, such as growth, purpose, identity, and perception. Instead of saying, I changed my thinking, you might say, I shifted my perspective, or my mindset underwent a transformation. Words like perspective and transformation belong to abstract discourse, frequently used in psychology, leadership, and personal development communication. Imagine describing personal development. Instead of saying, I became more confident, you could say, I developed a strong sense of self-assurance, or my confidence flourished over time. The verb flourished metaphorically links personal growth to plant growth, symbolizing natural expansion. Let's explore intellectual abstraction. Instead of saying, we need new ideas, you might say, we need innovative thinking, or we must cultivate fresh perspectives. Words like cultivate, again borrow from agriculture, reinforce in metaphorical abstraction. Now, let's embed this into a professional scenario. Instead of saying, the company changed direction, you could say, the company underwent a strategic shift, or it redefined its vision. Words like vision in corporate discourse are metaphorical, representing long-term direction rather than physical sight. Let's pause for reflective upgrading. Basic sentence. I learned a lot from failure. Upgrade. Failure became a powerful teacher in my life. Or, my failures shaped my resilience. Notice how abstract nouns like resilience elevate emotional interpretation. Now, let's explore rhetorical articulation, language used to persuade, inspire, and influence audiences. Instead of saying, "We must work together," you might say, "We must stand united," or "Collective effort is essential." Words like collective frequently appear in diplomatic, political, and organizational communication. Imagine delivering a speech. Instead of saying, "This is a big opportunity," you could say, "This is a defining moment," or "This is an opportunity that could reshape our future." Words like defining moment carry historical and emotional significance. Let's do another contextual inference exercise. Listen carefully. His words ignited a sense of purpose in the audience. Even if ignited is metaphorical, context reveals meaning, inspired, sparked, energized. This metaphor connects speech to fire, symbolizing emotional activation. Now, let's reinforce rhetorical collocations, ignite passion, spark change, drive progress, inspire action. These phrases dominate motivational speaking and leadership discourse. Let's move into evaluative abstraction. Instead of saying, "The idea is risky," you might say, "The idea carries significant risk," or "It involves considerable uncertainty." Abstract nouns like uncertainty elevate analytical tone. Imagine discussing global issues. Instead of saying, "The world has many problems," you could say, "The world faces complex challenges," or "We are navigating this era of uncertainty." Words like era frame time historically rather than casually. Now, let's step into philosophical vocabulary. Instead of saying, "Life is hard," you might say, "Life is inherently unpredictable," or "Life presents profound challenges." Words like inherently and profound belong to reflective discourse. Let's do a guided emotional articulation practice. Basic sentence: I lost motivation. Upgrade: My motivation gradually faded. Or, I experienced a decline in motivation. Notice the tonal maturity. The emotion is described analytically rather than impulsively. Now, imagine describing hope. Instead of saying, "I felt hopeful," you could say, "I felt cautiously optimistic." This phrase is widely used in journalism and professional reporting. Let's pause for immersive visualization again. Picture a leader addressing a team after hardship. Listen to the advanced articulation. Together, we will rise above these challenges and rebuild with renewed determination. Words like rise above and renewed determination create motivational resonance. Now, let's explore identity expression. Instead of saying, "I want to become better," you might say, "I strive to become the best version of myself." Or, "I am committed to personal excellence." Words like strive and excellence reflect aspirational vocabulary. Let's reinforce metaphorical clusters again. Climb the ladder of success. Plant the seeds of change. Build a foundation. Shape the future. Each phrase communicates progress through metaphorical construction. Take a slow breath here, because this stage of vocabulary mastery transforms communication into influence. It allows you not only to describe reality, but to frame it, shape it, and emotionally color it. As you continue moving deeper into C2 vocabulary mastery, the next transformation begins to unfold in the way you construct extended speech, not just sentences, but sustained expression, the kind of language you use when explaining ideas, narrating experiences, defending opinions, or reflecting on life events. At this stage, Vocabulary is no longer functioning in isolation. It operates within discourse flow, shaping rhythm, persuasion, and clarity over longer stretches of communication. Let's begin by exploring experiential narration, the language you use when describing real-life events in detail. Imagine you are recounting a memorable journey. A basic speaker might say, "The trip was very interesting, and I learned a lot." But at the C2 level, experiential narration expands in both descriptive density and reflective interpretation. You might say, "The journey was profoundly enriching and offered invaluable insights into different cultures and perspectives." Notice how vocabulary like profoundly enriching and invaluable insights elevates the narrative beyond simple enjoyment into intellectual and emotional growth. Now let's deepen narrative layering. Because C2 speakers rarely describe events without interpreting their impact. Instead of saying, "I met many people," you could say, "I had the opportunity to interact with individuals from diverse backgrounds," or "I engaged in meaningful conversations that broadened my worldview." Words like diverse, engaged, and broadened transform social interaction into developmental experience. Let's pause for guided storytelling practice. Picture yourself describing your first day at a new job. I will first narrate it simply, then elevate it. Basic. I was nervous, but excited. Advanced. I felt a mixture of apprehension and anticipation as I stepped into a completely new professional environment. Notice the emotional duality expressed through apprehension and anticipation. This emotional pairing is common in advanced storytelling, where experiences are rarely one-dimensional. Now imagine describing workplace atmosphere. Instead of saying, "Everyone was friendly," you might say, "The workplace culture was remarkably welcoming and supportive," or "There was a strong sense of collaboration among colleagues." Words like culture and collaboration belong to organizational discourse. Let's expand into reflective narration, language used to analyze past experiences. Instead of saying, "I learned from my mistakes," you could say, "My mistakes became valuable learning experiences," or "They contributed significantly to my personal growth." Words like contributed signal causality and development. Now let's explore adversity narration. Instead of saying, "I had many problems," you might say, "I encountered numerous challenges along the way," or "I faced a series of obstacles that tested my resilience." Words like tested my resilience transform difficulty into character development. Let's pause for contextual inference again. Listen carefully. The experience pushed me beyond my comfort zone. Even if unfamiliar, context reveals meaning. It forced growth. Discomfort led to development. This phrase is extremely common in motivational and educational discourse. Let's reinforce experiential collocations, gain experience, broaden horizons, overcome adversity, embrace challenges. These phrases dominate personal storytelling at the advanced level. Now let's move into opinion articulation, expressing viewpoints with intellectual clarity. Instead of saying, "I think social media is bad," you might say, "I believe social media has both positive and negative implications," or "Its impact on society is complex and multifaceted." Words like implications and multifaceted reflect analytical thinking. Imagine participating in a debate. Instead of saying, I don't agree, you could say, I respectfully disagree with that perspective. Or, I hold an alternative viewpoint. Such phrasing maintains professionalism while expressing opposition. Now let's deepen argumentative vocabulary. Instead of saying, your idea is wrong, you might say, your argument lacks sufficient evidence, or it overlooks key factors. Words like overlooks signal analytical critique rather than emotional rejection. Let's pause for persuasive articulation practice. Basic sentence. We should invest more in education. Upgrade. It is essential that we allocate greater resources to education. Or, investing in education is a long-term societal imperative. Words like allocate and imperative elevate policy discourse. Now let's explore explanatory fluency. Instead of saying, let me explain, you might say, allow me to elaborate, or let me clarify this further. Words like elaborate and clarify dominate academic and professional communication. Imagine presenting an idea. Instead of saying, this happens because of many reasons, you could say, this phenomenon is driven by multiple factors. Words like phenomenon introduce academic tone. Let's move into problem analysis narration. Instead of saying, the project failed, you might say, the project encountered significant setbacks, or it ultimately fell short of its objectives. Words like objectives frame outcomes strategically. Now let's embed this into leadership communication. Instead of saying, we must improve, you might say, we must strive for continuous improvement. The phrase continuous improvement is widely used in corporate and performance discourse. Let's pause for immersive visualization. Picture yourself leading a team meeting. Listen to the advanced articulation. Our goal is to enhance efficiency while maintaining quality. Words like enhance and maintaining signal balance-focused leadership thinking. Now let's explore future-oriented narration. Instead of saying, I want success, you might say, I aspire to achieve long-term success, or I'm working towards sustainable achievement. Words like aspire reflect ambition and vision. Imagine discussing career plans. Instead of saying, I want to grow, you could say, I aim to advance professionally, or I am committed to career progression. Words like progression belong to HR and professional development discourse. Let's reinforce future collocations, pursue opportunities, achieve milestones, realize potential, fulfill ambitions. These clusters frequently appear in motivational and career communication. Now let's move into emotional storytelling again. Instead of saying, I was proud, you might say, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride, or I experienced deep personal satisfaction. Notice the emotional scaling. Imagine describing gratitude. Instead of saying, I am thankful, you could say, I am deeply grateful, or I feel immense appreciation. Words like appreciation elevate emotional articulation. Let's pause for contextual inference one more time. Listen carefully. Her support meant the world to me. Even without literal explanation, the phrase communicates profound emotional value. Take a slow breath here, because at this stage, vocabulary is no longer just descriptive, it becomes relational, allowing you to connect experiences, emotions, and reflections in extended speech. As your expressive range continues to expand, you now arrive at one of the most decisive thresholds of C2 fluency: register control and tonal adaptability. This is the ability to adjust your vocabulary depending on who you are speaking to, the environment you are in, and the communicative outcome you are trying to achieve. At this level, you no longer speak English in one fixed style. You shift, refine, soften, or intensify your language dynamically. Imagine speaking to a close friend. You might say, "I'm really tired today." Casual, natural, emotionally direct. But in a professional setting, you might express the same state differently. "I feel somewhat fatigued today." Or, "I'm experiencing a bit of exhaustion after a demanding week." Notice how the vocabulary becomes more formal, less emotionally exposed, and more socially calibrated. Let's explore this tonal shift through workplace communication. Instead of telling a colleague, "You made a mistake," which sounds blunt, you might say, "There seems to be a small oversight here," or "We may need to revisit this section." Words like oversight and phrases like revisit this section soften criticism while preserving clarity. Now imagine leadership communication. Instead of saying, "Do this quickly," you might say, "Could you prioritize this task?" Or, "I would appreciate it if this could be handled promptly." Words like prioritize signal authority without sounding aggressive. Let's pause for guided tonal awareness. I will give you a direct sentence, then soften it through register control. Direct. Your report is bad. Refined. The report could benefit from further refinement. Or, there are areas that may need improvement. This diplomatic phrasing is essential in professional environments. Now let's explore academic register. Instead of saying, "Many people think this is true," you might say, "There is a widely held belief that this is true." Or, "This perspective is broadly supported." Words like widely held belief belong to scholarly discourse. Imagine writing or presenting research. Instead of saying, "We looked at the EU results," you could say, "We examined the findings." Or, "We conducted a detailed analysis." Words like examined and analysis elevate intellectual tone. Let's move into formal persuasion. Instead of saying, "You should consider this," you might say, "I would strongly encourage you to consider this." Or, "This approach merits serious consideration." Words like merit signal evaluative authority. Now let's contrast formal and informal emotional expression. Informal. "I was really shocked." Formal. "I was deeply astonished." Or, "I found the situation profoundly surprising." Notice the lexical upgrade. Let's embed this into a real-life scenario. Imagine receiving unexpected news at work. Instead of saying, "This is crazy," you might say, "This development is quite unexpected." Or, "This is a surprising turn of events." Such phrasing maintains composure and professionalism. Now let's explore apology register. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry for the problem," you could say, "I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience caused." This phrase is standard in corporate communication. Imagine service communication. Instead of saying, "We made a mistake," you might say, An error occurred on our end. Notice how responsibility is acknowledged diplomatically. Let's pause for contextual inference. Listen carefully. We regret any inconvenience this may have caused. Even if unfamiliar, context signals formal apology, frequently used in official announcements. Now let's move into polite disagreement register. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," you might say, "I see your point, but I interpret it differently." Or, "I respectfully hold an alternative perspective." This language preserves dialogue while expressing difference. Imagine participating in an academic debate. Instead of saying, "Your argument makes no sense," you could say, "Your argument lacks sufficient supporting evidence." Words like supporting evidence signal analytical critique. Let's explore emotional restraint vocabulary. Instead of saying, "I was very angry," you might say, "I was deeply frustrated," or "I felt considerable dissatisfaction." These phrases regulate emotional intensity, especially in professional discourse. Now, let's contrast enthusiastic register. Instead of saying, "I'm very excited," you might say, "I'm genuinely enthusiastic about this opportunity," or "I'm eager to begin." Words like enthusiastic and eager are widely used in interviews and formal communication. Let's pause for reflective upgrading. Basic. "I want this job." Advanced. "I am highly interested in this position." Or, "I am deeply motivated to contribute." Notice how the tone becomes purpose-driven rather than desire-driven. Now, let's explore gratitude register. Instead of saying, "Thanks a lot," you might say, "I sincerely appreciate your support." Or, "I am truly grateful for your assistance." Words like appreciate and grateful elevate politeness. Imagine professional closure statements. Instead of saying, "Let me know," you could say, "Please feel free to contact me." Or, "I look forward to your response." These phrases are essential in formal correspondence. Let's move into instruction register. Instead of saying, "Follow the rules," you might say, "Please adhere to the guidelines." Words like adhere signal formal compliance language. Imagine policy communication. Instead of saying, "You must do this," you could say, "It is mandatory to comply." Words like mandatory belong to regulatory discourse. Let's pause for immersive visualization again. Picture yourself delivering a formal presentation. Listen to the advanced articulation. Our objective is to ensure operational excellence while maintaining customer satisfaction. Words like operational excellence belong to executive-level vocabulary. Now let's explore situational adaptability. See, two speakers instinctively adjust tone depending on context. Speaking casually with friends, professionally with colleagues, formally in academic writing, diplomatically in conflict situations. This flexibility is what makes communication effective rather than merely fluent. Imagine telling a friend about a delay. "The train was late." Now imagine informing a manager. "There was an unexpected delay in transportation." Same event, different register. Let's reinforce register clusters. Address concerns. Raise issues. Express dissatisfaction. Convey appreciation. Extend gratitude. These phrases dominate formal dialogue. Take a slow breath here, because what you are mastering now is communicative intelligence, not just vocabulary knowledge. the ability to shape tone consciously. As we move deeper into the final stages of your C2 vocabulary expansion, all the elements you have been building, precision, collocation, metaphor, narration, and register, now begin to converge into one unified skill, situational fluency. This is the ability to access advanced vocabulary spontaneously, not when you are writing slowly, but when you are thinking, reacting, explaining, negotiating, and expressing yourself in real time. At this level, fluency is no longer measured by how many words you know, but by how naturally you can retrieve and apply them within real-life situations. Let's begin immersing you in these applied contexts, so your vocabulary moves from passive recognition to active production. Imagine you are attending an important job interview. The interviewer asks you to describe yourself. A basic response might sound like, "I am hardworking and I like learning new things." But at the C2 level, self-description becomes layered, reflective, and professionally calibrated. You might say, "I consider myself a highly motivated individual who is committed to continuous learning and professional development." Notice how phrases like highly motivated and continuous learning signal maturity and long-term vision. Let's expand this response further. Instead of saying, "I work well with others," you could say, "I thrive in collaborative environments and value effective teamwork." Words like thrive and collaborative environments carry corporate fluency. Now imagine discussing a challenge you faced. Instead of saying, "I had a problem at work," you might say, "I encountered a significant challenge in managing project deadlines," or "I faced a complex situation that required strategic problem solving." Words like strategic and problem solving elevate competence perception. Let's pause for a guided situational practice. Picture yourself explaining how you resolved that challenge. Basic: "I fixed the problem." Advanced: "I implemented a solution that improved workflow efficiency." Or, "I took the initiative to streamline the process." Words like implemented and streamline signal leadership action. Now let's step into workplace presentation fluency. Imagine you are presenting a project update. Instead of saying, "The project is going well," you might say, "The project is progressing according to schedule." Or, "We are achieving key milestones." Words like milestones dominate professional reporting. If challenges arise, instead of saying, "We have some issues," you could say, "We are currently addressing a few operational challenges." Notice how the phrasing maintains composure and solution focus. Let's move into negotiation language. Instead of saying, "We want better terms," you might say, "We would like to renegotiate the terms," or "We are seeking more favorable conditions." Words like renegotiate and favorable conditions belong to business discourse. Now imagine customer communication. Instead of saying, "We will fix it soon," you could say, "We are working to resolve the issue promptly," or "We appreciate your patience as we address the matter." Such phrasing builds trust and professionalism. Let's pause for contextual inference. Listen carefully. We are committed to delivering the highest standard of service. Even without analysis, the phrase communicates reliability and dedication, frequently used in corporate messaging. Now let's move into social situational fluency. Imagine attending a formal networking event. Instead of saying, "Nice to meet you," you might say, "It's a pleasure to meet you," or "I've heard great things about your work." Words like pleasure elevate politeness. If discussing collaboration, instead of saying, "Let's work together," you could say, "I would welcome the opportunity to collaborate." This phrasing signals professionalism and enthusiasm. Let's step into conflict resolution dialogue. Instead of saying, "We have a problem," you might say, "There appears to be a misunderstanding," or "Let's work toward a mutually beneficial solution." Words like mutually beneficial reflect diplomatic fluency. Now imagine leadership reassurance. Instead of saying, "Don't worry," you could say, "Please be assured that we are addressing the situation." Words like "be assured" convey calm authority. Let's move into academic situational fluency. Imagine presenting research findings. Instead of saying, "We found interesting results," you might say, "The findings revealed significant patterns," or "The data indicates compelling trends." Words like indicates and trends are common in research communication. If discussing limitations, instead of saying, "There were problems in the study," you could say, "The study had certain limitations." This phrasing reflects scholarly tone. Let's pause for reflective upgrading again. Basic: I learned new skills. Advanced: I acquired valuable competencies. Or, I developed a diverse skill set. Words like competencies and skill set belong to professional evaluation language. Now let's step into motivational speaking fluency. Instead of saying, "You can succeed," you might say, "You have the potential to achieve remarkable success," or "Your dedication will determine your outcomes." Words like potential and outcomes frame growth analytically. Imagine encouraging a team. Instead of saying, "Work harder," you could say, "Let's push beyond our limits," or "Let's strive for excellence." Words like strive reflect aspirational discourse. Let's explore reflective life fluency. Instead of saying, "Life taught me lessons," you might say, "Life has been my greatest teacher," or "My experiences have shaped my perspective." Notice how experiential abstraction integrates with metaphor. Now let's move into future vision articulation. Instead of saying, "I want a better future," you could say, "I am working toward a more fulfilling future," or "I am building a life aligned with my aspirations." Words like "xiao" aligned signal psychological intentionality. Let's pause for immersive visualization. Picture yourself delivering a graduation speech. Listen to the articulation. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. Words like "new chapter" function metaphorically while remaining universally understandable. Now let's integrate emotional resilience fluency. Instead of saying, "I never gave up," you might say, "I remained steadfast in the face of adversity," or "I persevered despite the challenges." Words like persevered signal inner strength. Let's reinforce situational collocation clusters. Address challenges. Achieve objectives. Build relationships. Deliver results. Foster growth. These phrases dominate executive and leadership dialogue. Take a slow breath here, because what you are developing now is spontaneous, expressive readiness. The ability to access high-level vocabulary instantly when real communication demands it. As you approach the highest layers of C2 vocabulary mastery, something remarkable begins to take shape. Your language no longer feels like something you are learning. It begins to feel like something you are living. The words you choose start reflecting not only what you know, but who you are, your mindset, your worldview, your emotional intelligence, and your intellectual depth. This final stage is not about adding more vocabulary. It is about consolidating it, integrating it, and allowing it to function naturally across every dimension of your communication. Let us begin this consolidation phase through deep, reflective articulation, the kind of language you use when you analyze your own growth, your challenges, and your transformation over time. Instead of saying, "My English improved," you might say, "My English proficiency has evolved significantly," or "I have undergone a remarkable linguistic transformation." Notice how words like proficiency and transformation elevate the reflection into intellectual territory. Now imagine looking back at your learning journey. Instead of saying, "It was difficult at first," you could say, "The initial stages were intellectually demanding," or "The early phase presented considerable challenges." Words like initial stages and considerable challenges frame difficulty integratively, not emotionally. Let's deepen this reflective fluency. Instead of saying, "I practiced every day," you might say, "I maintained consistent practice," or "I dedicated myself to daily improvement." Words like dedicated signal commitment rather than routine. Now imagine describing your mindset shift. Instead of saying, "I started thinking differently," you could say, "I developed a more growth-oriented mindset," or "My perspective on learning fundamentally changed." Words like fundamentally intensify transformation. Let's pause for guided self-reflection practice. Picture yourself explaining why you refuse to quit. Basic: "I didn't want to stop." Advanced: "I was determined to persevere despite the obstacles." Or, "Giving up was never an option for me." Words like persevere reflect motivational resilience. Now let's move into identity articulation. Instead of saying, "English is important to me," you might say, "English has become an integral part of my personal and professional identity." Words like integral signal deep integration rather than casual importance. Imagine describing confidence growth. Instead of saying, "I feel more confident now," you could say, "I have developed a strong sense of linguistic confidence," or "I now communicate with far greater self-assurance." Words like self-assurance reflect internal stability. Let's expand into intellectual self-expression. Instead of saying, "I can express ideas better," you might say, "I can now articulate complex ideas with clarity," or "My expressive precision has improved substantially." Words like articulate and precision belong to advanced discourse. Now let's consolidate emotional vocabulary. Instead of saying, "I am proud of myself," you could say, "I take immense pride in my progress," or "I feel deeply fulfilled by how far I've come." Words like fulfilled signal psychological satisfaction. Let's pause for contextual inference one more time. Listen carefully. This journey has been both challenging and profoundly rewarding. This dual framing, challenge and reward, is a hallmark of reflective C2 expression. Now let's move into life philosophy articulation. Instead of saying, "Learning never stops," you might say, learning is a lifelong pursuit. Or, personal growth is an ongoing process. Words like lifelong pursuit elevate philosophical tone. Imagine giving advice to other learners. Instead of saying, "Don't be afraid of mistakes," you could say, "Embrace mistakes as opportunities for growth." Words like embrace transform error into empowerment. Let's deepen motivational articulation. Instead of saying, "Keep going," you might say, "Remain committed to your journey," or "Stay steadfast in your efforts." Words like steadfast convey endurance. Now imagine describing the future impact of your fluency. Instead of saying, "English will help me," you could say, "English will open countless opportunities for me," or "It will expand my professional horizons." Words like expand horizons function metaphorically and professionally. Let's pause for immersive visualization again. Picture your future self speaking confidently in an international environment. Listen to the articulation. I am fully equipped to communicate in global contexts. Words like equipped signal readiness and capability. Now let's consolidate intellectual discourse vocabulary. Instead of saying, "Language changes thinking," you might say, "Language shapes cognition," or "Language influences perception." Words like cognition and perception belong to academic psychology discourse. Imagine discussing cultural understanding. Instead of saying, "English connects people," you could say, "English serves as a bridge between cultures." The metaphor of bridge communicates connection powerfully. Let's reinforce consolidation clusters: linguistic competence, expressive fluency, intellectual articulation, communicative confidence. These clusters define the identity of a C2 speaker. Now let's enter your final guided fluency reflection practice. Think about who you were before this journey. Basic: I knew little English. Advanced: my command of English was limited. Now think about who you are becoming. I now possess the ability to communicate with clarity and sophistication. Feel the identity shift embedded in vocabulary, because vocabulary mastery is not only linguistic, it is psychological. It reshapes how you see yourself in the world. Take a slow breath here and allow this realization to settle. You are no longer merely learning English. You are embodying it, expressing through it, thinking within it. And that is the essence of reaching the C2 level. As you arrive at the culmination of this vocabulary masterclass, it is important to pause, not to stop, but to recognize the magnitude of what you have built. Because reaching towards C2, vocabulary mastery is not a linear process. It is layered, reflective, and deeply transformative. Every word you have encountered, every phrase you have practiced, every expression you have upgraded has contributed to reshaping the way you perceive language and the way language allows you to perceive the world. At this level, vocabulary is no longer memorized. It is internalized. Words do not sit in your mind waiting to be recalled. They emerge naturally when situations demand them. When you narrate experiences, when you express emotions, when you analyze ideas, when you persuade, negotiate, reflect, and inspire. Advanced vocabulary becomes the bridge between thought and articulation. Think back to the early stages of your learning journey, when forming even simple sentences required effort, translation, hesitation. Now compare that to your current expressive range. You can describe complexity, interpret nuance, articulate, perspective, and communicate with intellectual and emotional precision. This shift is not accidental. It is the result of deliberate exposure, conscious practice, and sustained commitment. Let us consolidate everything you have absorbed through one final guided reflective articulation. Instead of saying, "I learned many words today," you can now say, "I have expanded my lexical repertoire significantly." Notice how words like lexical repertoire belong to the highest tier of linguistic discourse. Instead of saying, "My speaking improved," you might say, "My spoken fluency has advanced considerably," or "My ability to articulate thoughts has strengthened." Words like articulate signal, expressive command. Now imagine describing the long-term impact of this mastery. Instead of saying, "This will help my future," you could say, "This will positively influence my professional and personal trajectory." Words like trajectory frame life direction analytically. Let's pause for one final contextual inference. Listen carefully. This experience has equipped me with the tools necessary to communicate effectively in any environment. The word equipped communicates readiness, preparation, capability. This is the vocabulary of empowerment. Now let us bring everything together through a final immersive visualization. Picture yourself in an international conference room, surrounded by professionals from different countries, discussing ideas, presenting insights, exchanging perspectives. Listen to the articulation that now belongs to you. "I am confident in my ability to contribute meaningfully to this discussion." Feel the authority, the clarity, the calm intellectual presence embedded in that sentence. This is the communicative identity of a C2 speaker, because true vocabulary mastery is not measured by how complex your words sound, but by how precisely you can express meaning, adapt tone, and connect with others intellectually and emotionally. Take one last slow breath and recognize how far you have come, not just in vocabulary, but in confidence, perception, and expressive freedom. And now, as we gently close this masterclass, let us transition into a moment of gratitude and reflection. Thank you for dedicating your time, your focus, and your energy to this advanced vocabulary journey. Reaching toward C2 fluency requires patience, consistency, and deep intellectual curiosity. And the fact that you stayed present throughout this masterclass reflects a genuine commitment to your growth. I truly hope this session has not only expanded your vocabulary, but also strengthened your confidence in expressing complex thoughts, emotions, and ideas in English. Remember, mastery does not happen overnight, but every new word you internalize, every expression you practice, and every conversation you engage in brings you one step closer to linguistic excellence. Keep immersing yourself in advanced English. Keep listening, keep reflecting, and most importantly, keep speaking without fear. Because fluency is not built through perfection. It is built through courageous expression. If you found this masterclass valuable, and you would like to continue expanding your English fluency with us, make sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you never miss our upcoming advanced lessons designed to take your English to even greater heights. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep building the powerful voice you are developing in English.